Karen stormed out of her house, face flushed with rage. Her perfectly manicured nails dug into the palms of her hands as she marched across the neatly trimmed lawn toward the unsuspecting tree planter. The nerve of that man, disrupting the flow of her carefully curated energy field. "Excuse me?" she shouted, her shrill voice piercing the tranquil suburban silence. "What do you think you're doing?" The young man, caught off guard, turned to face the irate woman. "I'm, planting a tree," he stammered, gripping the sapling's delicate trunk. "A tree?" Karen scoffed, her eyes narrowing. "Do you have any idea how that's going to affect my aura?" The planter blinked, clearly bewildered. "Your aura?" "I'm sorry, ma'am, but I was just following the landscaping plan for this neighborhood." "Plan?" Karen's voice rose an octave, her perfectly coiffed hair seemingly bristling with indignation. "Do you have any idea how much time and money I've spent cultivating the perfect energy field in this house? And now you're just going to plop down some tree to ruin it all." The planter opened his mouth, but before he could respond, Karen raised a manicured hand, silencing him. "I won't stand for this," she declared, her tone dripping with disdain. "You need to remove that thing immediately. My chakras are already out of alignment just looking at it." The young man's brow furrowed in confusion. "Ma'am, I'm sorry, but I can't do that. This tree is part of the approved landscaping plan for the entire neighborhood. I don't have the authority to remove it." Karen's eyes widened, and for a moment, it seemed as if steam might start pouring from her ears. "Authority?" she spat. "Do you have any idea who I am? I'm the president of the Homeowners Association. This is my neighborhood, and I demand that you remove that abomination immediately." The planter's eyes widened in realization, and he quickly glanced around, hoping to spot a supervisor or manager who could defuse the situation. But, alas, he was alone, facing the wrath of an entitled Karen. As the confrontation escalated, a small crowd began to gather, drawn by the commotion. Neighbors peered out of their windows, whispers and murmurs spreading through the community like wildfire. This was not the first time Karen had made a scene, and it certainly wouldn't be the last. Karen's tirade continued, her shrill voice carrying across the neighborhood as the young tree planter stood his ground, desperately trying to reason with her. "Ma'am, I understand your concerns, but I'm not authorized to remove this tree. It's part of the approved landscaping plan for the entire community." "I don't care about your plan." Karen spat, her eyes narrowed to slits. "This is my house, my property, and my neighborhood. I won't have some tree ruining the delicate balance of my aura." The small crowd of onlookers murmured and shuffled their feet, clearly uncomfortable with the confrontation. But Karen was unfazed, her sense of entitlement fueling her relentless tirade. "I'm going to call the HOA right now," she declared, whipping out her phone and stabbing at the screen with her perfectly manicured fingers. "They'll have to listen to me. I'm the president, for crying out loud." The planter's eyes widened as he realized the gravity of the situation. If Karen was truly the HOA president, she could make his life a living hell. But he couldn't simply give in to her demands, not when he was following the approved landscaping plan. "Ma'am, I really can't remove the tree," he tried again, his voice trembling slightly. "I'd be breaking protocol and risking my job. Please, let's find a reasonable solution here." Karen's only response was a withering glare as she brought the phone to her ear, her perfectly manicured brows furrowed in determination. "Hello. Yes, this is Karen Standish, the HOA president. I have a situation here that needs to be addressed immediately. There's a tree being planted in my neighborhood, and it's disrupting my aura. I demand that it be removed at once." The planter watched in horror as Karen described the situation, her voice dripping with condescension. He could only imagine the poor soul on the other end of the line, frantically trying to placate the irate woman. As the confrontation continued to unfold, the small crowd of onlookers grew, their murmurs and whispers becoming more pronounced. The tension in the air was palpable, and it was clear that this was no ordinary dispute over a simple tree. The minutes felt like hours as Karen continued her heated conversation with the HOA representative on the phone. The young tree planter stood helplessly, his eyes darting between Karen and the growing crowd of onlookers, unsure of how to proceed. Suddenly, a silver Lexus SUV pulled up to the curb, and a well-dressed middle-aged woman stepped out, clutching a leather-bound folder. The crowd parted to make way as she approached the scene, her face a mask of concern. "What's going on here?" the woman asked, her gaze shifting between Karen and the planter. Karen whirled around, her expression softening momentarily. "Ah, Brenda, thank goodness you're here. This imbecile is trying to plant a tree in my neighborhood, and it's disrupting my aura." Brenda, the HOA manager, turned to the planter, her brow furrowed. "Is this true? Why are you planting a tree here?" The young man swallowed hard, his voice trembling. I am following the approved landscaping plan for the neighborhood. This tree is part of the plan, and I'm not authorized to remove it." Brenda's eyes widened, and she quickly flipped through the pages in her folder. "Let me see here. Ah, yes, the neighborhood landscaping plan." She paused, her gaze shifting between Karen and the planter. "The plan does call for the placement of this tree." Karen's face contorted with rage, her manicured nails digging into the palms of her hands. "But Brenda, you must understand. This tree is completely disrupting my aura. I can't have it here." Brenda raised a hand, silencing Karen's outburst. "I understand your concerns, Karen, but the landscaping plan was approved by the entire HOA board, including you. We can't just go around removing trees at the whim of individual homeowners." Karen's eyes widened, and for a moment, it seemed as if steam might start pouring from her ears. "But I'm the president of the HOA. Surely my concerns should take precedence." Brenda shook her head, her expression firm. "I'm sorry, Karen, but the rules apply to everyone, including the HOA president. The tree stays." The crowd around them erupted in murmurs and whispers, clearly delighted by the turn of events. Karen's face flushed with fury, and she opened her mouth, ready to unleash another tirade. But before she could utter a word, Brenda raised her hand, silencing her. "I suggest you go back inside, Karen, and take some time to, realign your aura. This tree is staying, and that's final." As the HOA manager, Brenda, firmly put an end to Karen's demands, the irate woman stormed back into her house, her face contorted with rage. She paced back and forth in her living room, her mind racing as she tried to come up with a plan to get rid of the offending tree. "How dare they?" she muttered under her breath, her perfectly manicured nails digging into the palms of her hands. "That tree is ruining my aura. I won't stand for it." Karen paused, her eyes narrowing as a devious plan began to take shape in her mind. She reached for her phone and began furiously tapping away, her fingers moving with a sense of purpose. "If the HOA won't listen to me, then I'll just have to find another way to get that abomination removed," she murmured, a calculating smile spreading across her face. Minutes later, Karen emerged from her house, a triumphant gleam in her eyes. She strode purposefully across the lawn, her gaze fixed on the unsuspecting tree planter, who was packing up his tools. "Excuse me," Karen said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "I wanted to apologize for my earlier outburst. I understand that you're just following the rules, and I shouldn't have been so harsh." The planter paused, his eyes narrowing suspiciously. That's all right, ma'am. I appreciate the apology." Karen flashed him a dazzling smile, her eyes sparkling with a hint of mischief. "Well, I'm just glad we could clear the air. And I was thinking, maybe there's something I can do to make up for all the trouble I've caused you." The planter's brow furrowed in confusion. "Make up for it? I'm not sure I understand." Karen waved a dismissive hand, her smile never wavering. "Oh, it's nothing really. I was just thinking that, since I'm the HOA president, I might be able to, put in a good word for you with the board. Maybe even get you a raise or a promotion." The planter's eyes widened, and he shifted uncomfortably. "That's very kind of you, ma'am, but I really don't think that's necessary. I'm just doing my job, after all." Karen's smile grew even wider, her eyes glinting with triumph. "Nonsense. It's the least I can do. And if you ever need anything else, just let me know." With that, she turned and strode back towards her house, leaving the bewildered planter in her wake. As she walked, Karen couldn't help but chuckle to herself, already imagining the next phase of her plan. "Just you wait, you stupid tree," she muttered under her breath. "I'll have you gone before you know it." Karen spent the next few days meticulously planning her scheme to rid her neighborhood of the offending tree. She knew that directly confronting the HOA again would be futile, so she had to find a more subtle approach. First, she reached out to the tree planter, feigning remorse and offering him a special opportunity to advance his career. The naive young man, desperate to please his superiors, eagerly accepted Karen's offer, unaware of her true intentions. "I'm so glad we were able to clear the air, dear," Karen cooed, her voice dripping with false sincerity. "Now I have a little favor to ask of you. You see, I've been thinking about this tree, and I just can't help but worry about the impact it might have on the neighborhood." The planter's brow furrowed, and he opened his mouth to protest, but Karen raised a manicured hand to silence him. Now, I know the HOA has already approved the landscaping plan. But, as the president, I have a responsibility to ensure the well-being of our community, and I can't help but feel that this tree might be, well, problematic. She paused, fixing the planter with a pointed stare. "That's where you come in, dear. I was hoping you might be able to, reconsider the placement of this particular tree. Perhaps find a more suitable location, The planter's eyes widened, and he shifted uncomfortably. "But ma'am, I really can't do that. The plan is set, and I'm not authorized to make any changes." Karen tesked, her lips forming a sympathetic pout. "Oh, I understand, dear. But surely, as the president of the HOA, I could, persuade the board to make an exception. All you'd have to do is, suggest that the tree might be better suited somewhere else." The planter hesitated, his gaze darting around nervously. "I don't know, ma'am. That sounds an awful lot like going against protocol. I could lose my job." Karen leaned in, her eyes gleaming with a predatory intensity. Now, let's not be hasty. I'm sure we can come to an arrangement that would benefit us both. After all, I am the one who can make or break your career, aren't I?" The planter swallowed hard, the weight of Karen's unspoken threat hanging heavy in the air. Slowly he nodded, his resolve crumbling under the relentless pressure of the HOA president's manipulation. "Wonderful," Karen exclaimed, clapping her hands together in delight. "I knew we could come to an understanding. Now, let's get to work on relocating that pesky tree, shall we?" Over the next few days, the unsuspecting tree planter, under the influence of Karen's manipulation, worked to relocate the offending tree. He carefully dug around the sapling, carefully transplanting it to a less prominent location in the neighborhood, all the while feeling a growing sense of unease. Meanwhile, Karen watched from the shadows, a smug grin plastered across her face. She had finally found a way to remove the tree that had been disrupting her precious aura, and she couldn't wait to see the results of her scheming. However, the planter's tampering with the tree did not go unnoticed. As the days passed, the sapling began to wither and wilt, its once vibrant leaves turning a sickly shade of brown. Concerned neighbors began to take notice, and soon the HOA was flooded with complaints about the ailing tree. Brenda, the HOA manager, was immediately summoned to investigate the matter. "What on earth happened to this tree?" Brenda demanded, her brow furrowed in concern as she examined the sickly sapling. The planter, his face pale and his hands trembling, hesitantly explained that he had been instructed by Karen to relocate the tree. Brenda's eyes widened in horror, and she immediately realized the gravity of the situation. "You did what?" she exclaimed, her voice rising in pitch. "The landscaping plan specifically called for this tree to be planted here. Relocating it without approval is a direct violation of our protocols." The planter hung his head, his shoulders slumped in defeat. "I know, ma'am. But Karen, she threatened my job. I didn't know what else to do." Brenda let out an exasperated sigh, pinching the bridge of her nose. "Oh, Karen. I should have known she was behind this." The HOA manager turned to the small crowd of gathered neighbors, her expression grave. "I'm afraid we're going to have to remove this tree entirely. It's beyond saving at this point." The crowd erupted in murmurs and whispers, their indignation palpable. Karen, who had been watching the scene unfold from her window, felt a surge of triumph. But her victory was short-lived as Brenda continued to address the crowd. "And as for the person responsible for this sabotage, we will be taking disciplinary action. This kind of behavior is unacceptable and goes against everything the HOA stands for." Brenda's gaze locked with the planter's, and he cringed, knowing that he would bear the brunt of the consequences. Karen, on the other hand, paled, realizing that her carefully orchestrated plan was about to unravel. As the news of the sabotage tree spread through the neighborhood, the outrage among the residents only grew. Karen, who had been basking in the perceived triumph of her scheme, soon found herself the target of intense scrutiny and criticism. Neighbors, who had long tolerated Karen's entitled behavior, now turned on her with a vengeance. They flooded the HOA's inbox with angry emails, demanding that the organization take immediate action against the HOA president. Brenda, caught in the crossfire, knew that she had to address the situation head-on. Summoning Karen to an emergency HOA meeting, she confronted the woman, her usually calm demeanor giving way to barely contained fury. "Karen, do you have any idea the mess you've created?" Brenda snapped, her brow furrowed in a rare display of anger. "The entire neighborhood is up in arms, and it's all because of your selfish and vindictive actions." Karen, caught off guard by the intensity of Brenda's outburst, attempted to defend herself. "But Brenda, you don't understand. That tree was disrupting my aura. I had to do something about it." Brenda scoffed, shaking her head in disbelief. "Your aura? That's your excuse for sabotaging the landscaping plan and putting the planter's job at risk. You're the president of this HOA, Karen. You're supposed to set an example, not abuse your power for petty personal gain." The other board members, who had remained silent throughout the exchange, now joined in, their voices rising in a chorus of condemnation. "This is unacceptable behavior. We can't have the HOA president undermining our own protocols. Karen, you've gone too far this time." As the criticism mounted, Karen's face flushed with a mixture of embarrassment and rage. She opened her mouth to retaliate, but Brenda silenced her with a raised hand. "That's enough, Karen. The board has decided that your actions warrant immediate disciplinary action. Effective immediately, you are being stripped of your position as HOA president." Karen's eyes widened in shock, and she sputtered, "You can't do that. This is my neighborhood." Brenda leveled a stern gaze at the disgraced woman. "I'm afraid we can, and we have. Your sense of entitlement and blatant disregard for the rules have caused too much damage. You are no longer fit to lead this community." As the other board members nodded in agreement, Karen's world began to crumble around her. The realization that her carefully constructed facade of control had been shattered left her reeling, and she knew that her reign of entitled behavior had finally come to an end. As the news of Karen's dismissal from the HOA presidency spread through the neighborhood, a collective sigh of relief could be felt among the residents. For years, they had endured her entitled behavior and watched helplessly as she abused her power to serve her own selfish interests. Now, with Karen stripped of her position, the community finally had a chance to breathe easy and reclaim their peaceful suburban life. The once sickly tree, transplanted by the remorseful planter, had even begun to show signs of recovery, its leaves slowly regaining their vibrant green hue. But for Karen, the fall from grace was a bitter pill to swallow. She had built her entire identity around being the queen of the neighborhood, and the loss of that status left her feeling adrift and deeply resentful. Desperate to regain some semblance of control, Karen began to lash out at her neighbors, accusing them of conspiring against her and spreading vicious rumors about Brenda and the HOA board. But her efforts were futile, as the community had grown weary of her antics and refused to be cowed by her tirades. One day, as Karen was storming out of her house, intent on confronting Brenda once again, she tripped over the newly replanted tree, tumbling to the ground in a heap. The neighbors, who had been watching the scene unfold, erupted in laughter, their glee at Karen's misfortune palpable. As the disgraced woman lay on the ground, her perfectly coiffed hair disheveled and her designer outfit covered in dirt, she realized that her aura was the least of her problems. The once untouchable Karen Standish had finally been humbled, and the weight of her own actions had come crashing down upon her. From that day on, Karen's influence in the neighborhood waned, and she became a cautionary tale of the consequences of unchecked entitlement and abuse of power. The community, emboldened by her downfall, banded together to ensure that no one else would ever wield such unchecked control over their lives again. And as for the tree, it stood tall and proud, a symbol of the resilience and strength of a community that had reclaimed its rightful place, free from the shadow of Karen's aura-disrupting reign.